And welcome, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Bazil, otherwise Patrick, and I am joined with the one, the only, Mr. David Reid. How's it going, sir?
It's going well, Baz. How are you doing?
Good, good. I want to apologize first to the stream. There is some hissing in the background. I have no idea why. It's Skype's fault. Honestly, I just kind of gave up trying to fix this stupid thing. You're gonna hear a little kid's voice in the background. My son's room is just across the hallway from me. He's supposed to be in bed, but that's obviously not the case. So we're gonna be talking about this little kind of thing called Meta Arcade and your first kind of project.
Yeah.
I'm actually really excited about this, mainly because this is something that's kind of unique for me. I don't have time to play board games a lot because, I don't have time to go out and go socialize. So what you're doing kind of appeals to me from a non-social point of view, which is really, really weird. And I'm just really excited for it. The game that you're going to be actually producing is Tunnels and Trolls Naked Doom. Is that the correct title? Did I get that right?
Well, so what I tell you is the first game is Tunnels and Trolls. And Tunnels and Trolls was a game that was originally published in the 70s. It was the second role-playing game ever published. But it is also notable, not just for that, but because it is the first game that ever had solo adventures. And so now it comes together where Tunnels and Trolls was also a group play game with a game master and a group of adventurers going together, much like its predecessor, Dungeons and Dragons. But Tunnels and Trolls was unique with respect to having those solo adventures, and over 30 of them have been published directly by the original publisher, Flying Buffalo, and more have come out over the years.
Wow.
Naked Doom is the first adventure for Tunnels and Trolls that we will have available.
That is awesome. Okay, so when I first heard Naked Doom, my instant first reaction was like, okay, Doom, I've played that game. That's cool. Then I did a little more research, and I was like, oh, it's like part of the actual, like, kind of, I guess, mythos or lore type of story?
Yes.
Which would be more fitting, I guess, than,
exactly.
a guy shooting demons.
Well, Naked Doom is, look, it's one of my favorites, and it won't take long for people on the stream to realize Tunnels and Trolls is a very special place in my heart and a very long part of my gaming history. Naked Doom in particular is a really interesting adventure. Now, talk about Tunnels and Trolls a bit. The primary campaign world that Tunnels and Trolls was set in is called Troll World. It's the creation of the original designer of the game, Ken St. Andre, who also designed Tunnels and Trolls. And in his world, he had a mythology where basically part of what was particularly interesting about Tunnels and Trolls is the troll world is a place where the monsters won, right? You think about a lot of worlds where, the good guys, or as in TNT, we call them the good kindred, the humans, the elves, the dwarves, the hobs, there are a few others, leprechauns and fairies are their allies as well. In Troll World, those guys did not win the Great Wars. And in fact, the wizard who was the lead of that effort, elven wizard named Kazan, was exiled after the war. And yet Kazan remains the capital city where the imperial power of the death hordes of Le Rotra are still in power. Now, the reason I give you all that is that Naked Doom is set as a prison dungeon at the bottom, well underneath the courthouse of Kazan. And so if you are somebody in the mythology of Troll World who gets into trouble with the law in Kazan, there aren't a lot of options, and they're all bad. If you happen to be a magic user, a person who can cast spells in TNT, that would be a wizard or a rogue, those people are in much worse shape because they are basically sent out to the potato fields and their minds are blasted into idiocy, so they can never cast a spell again and potentially go against the Empire. But if you're a warrior, a person who knows no magic, you have the option of death or entering the Naked Doom dungeon. So, and that's how it begins, right? And part of that for me is just this is old school fantasy at its finest.
Of course,
right? You look at, and believe me, I'm not knocking games of today. They are just different. They are very intricately balanced. There is a role for every class, and you look at a D&D or a Pathfinder or what have you in the role-playing game space, and it's always meticulously designed in such a way that everyone gets their moment and that parts play well together. And that makes a lot of sense for group-based games. In a solo adventure, however, right, it's a little more interesting to sort of put the player up against some real adversity and have some real consequences. And that's where Naked Doom made its first mark, I think, right? That, in the prologue Ken wrote for the adventure, he even said, I will tell you honestly, I am honestly trying to kill your first level characters in this adventure, and I think I have a good shot at getting them in the first room. And for me as an old school gamer, it never left me. It was like, that's a challenge that I feel compelled to accept. I'm not going to necessarily invest a lot of love into the first character I throw into that dungeon, but I'm going to beat this dungeon.
That sounds horrifying. So
it is.
Now,
yeah.
One thing that I told Mr. Tailypoo is I played this game as a kid, and I only played a little bit of it, but it's kind of what started my love of D&D, in all honesty.
Yes.
I remember my dad showing me this game, and it was... I don't remember a lot about it. I was probably 10 years old, so that was way longer than I'd like to get into. And I just remember kind of being blown away at, like, the super kind of, like, creativity of it, and then just kind of being enthralled with, like, this kind of, like, RPG element of... I don't really know how to describe it, other than it was just a fantastic kind of segue into the world of gaming.
Yeah, and I think that's a fair way to put it, Baz. I mean, if you think about the history of RPGs and knowing that Dungeons & Dragons was the first, Dungeons & Dragons is descended from wargaming, right? It is a game that started from the idea of, if you think, and again, you got to turn your head back, 30, 40, 50 years in some cases, to think about how gaming was largely conducted in that era, where you'd go to a hobby shop on a weekend and you would see, large groups of people gathered around tables with meticulously painted Napoleonic figures or Civil War figures.
Mine were all silver.
Yeah, there you go. Rulers to measure how far they can move and things like that. Dungeons & Dragons was designed by people who had a real fondness for those games and thought, hey, let's add heroes. Let's add mythological monsters. Right. And over time realized, hey, there's a game to be made just about being one of these heroes. Yeah. And so a lot of those rules, systems, and structures remain in place that at some level led to at least what Ken St. Andre, the designer, believed was a bit more complexity in the face of what could be a far more accessible idea around storytelling and adventuring and those sorts of things. And so he found a way to think about it more inspired by the heroes of Marvel Comics, for example, as opposed to the the wargaming roots and the heroes of some of these other low fantasy sorts of ideas. And I think that's where you see some of that creativity and ingenuity of it is a much simpler role-playing system that at the end of the day, I think allows for a greater level of heroic play. More crazy things can happen in Tunnels and Trolls because it has that idea of being rooted more like you are growing up to be a comic book superhero at some level, as opposed to you're growing up to be a 10th, a 20th, a 30th level fighter or wizard, right? Something like that.
Right, yeah, okay. So I guess kind of my next question, if you can divulge this information, is what is the gameplay going to be like? Is it going to be kind of like a tabletop simulator style game where you have like different avatar pictures on the screen and everyone rolls dice and that kind of stuff? Like, can you go into detail on what the kind of fundamentals of the visual aspect of the game is going to be?
Sure. And think of it as this is the beginning of what I hope to be a much larger view, but the idea of what we are starting with is replicating the solo adventure experience with the highest level of authenticity and integrity that we can. And if you think about whether it was playing Tunnels and Trolls or reading a choose your own adventure book, right? If you remember those books, right? Turn to a page because the previous page told you, all right, if you want to go this way or if you want to go that way, flip to page X. And you would flip to page X, and in the case of a Tunnels and Trolls adventure, you'd flip to paragraph X. And you'd see some text. It would give you the situation. It would give you some options. Maybe you're in combat. Maybe you have to make a saving roll to avoid some hazard. And there'd also be art accompanying it, right? In Choose Your Own Adventure, you'd often have text on one page, art on the other page. Tunnels and Trolls, not always, right? In fact, you'd have more like 4 or 5 paragraphs on a page and one piece of art. So what we are doing is sort of taking those two ideas. As you progress through an adventure and you make your choices, you go to a new room, a new situation, right? The idea of paragraphs and pages is going to be gone in this sort of a metaphor. But you're looking at your screen on your PC or your screen on your tablet or your phone. And imagine art on the left-hand side that is the art from these classic adventures and the archives that we have of more. And I have some surprises on that I'm not ready to talk about just yet, but
Excellent.
I'm confident will delight many of the fans of this franchise. And so you're looking at some of this classic art, and you're also reading through the adventure of, okay, what should I do now? Do I fight or flee or negotiate? Do I turn left? Do I turn right?
Right.
Those kinds of things are what you're going to do. And as you go through those options, eventually you're going to get to a point where some dice need to be rolled. You're going to be in combat. You're going to have to make a saving roll, and dice will roll across the screen for you.
Okay.
And that's the gist of your experience, right? That it is very much the idea of traversing an adventure in the same way that you would do in the pen and paper era. However, a lot of the, how would I put it? A lot of the administrative work that you as a player had to do in terms of keeping track of a bunch of things, in terms of, make sure I go to the right paragraph and keep track of that. It's just going to be, a straightforward narrative adventure that you experience where, okay, now here's what I've chosen to do. If there's some dice rolling to do to solve for combat or saving throw or some other situation that happens, I then move on to the next decision that I get to make and progress through the adventure.
Awesome. So now you mentioned tablet and phone. So this is going to be like actually on my phone?
Assuming you have an iOS or an Android-based phone for your operating system, the answer is yes.
Okay, well, can you make like a flip phone Java game for it? Do you remember those awful things?
I remember those, yes.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Okay, so now, if everything's going to be, super mobile, does that mean like you can take it to a party and just like say, hey, who wants to play with me? Just set your tablet down and kind of like do like a group kind of adventure type of thing?
Well, you've hit on cooperative play, which is something we definitely want to do. It is not something we are working on right this second, but it is sort of, as I think about the long-term roadmap, something we have there. As well as there's no reason why in the as things progress to not there's no good reason not to have a PvP arena, right? The idea where I can take a character in, you can take a character in, and have a quick PvP battle.
Oh, that'd be fun.
Yeah, it would be a very different sort of experience, but it's also a very turn-based experience as opposed to, I think a lot of mobile games these days, they do give you that sense of, if I look away from this phone for a little while, something bad is likely to happen, right? The world is going to change, I'm getting ganked, someone's going to steal my stuff. A big part of why I believe this is a good experience for mobile is exactly that I can pick it up and I can play it, and I can rest assured that, the game will not progress without me as it does in other mobile worlds, I think.
I think that's super important because I can't tell you how many mobile games I'm like, oh, this is really cool. Like an hour and a half later, I'm like, wait, where'd all my stuff go? It's like, you were attacked by XXMLG Pro. It's like, what the crap? Where'd all my crap go? Oh my gosh. So like that's really, really interesting to me. I think that that's going to be a really cool aspect of just this particular project that you're working on. Now, in terms of future projects and just kind of like the future of Meta Arcade.
Sure.
Do you see yourself doing generally tabletop-oriented things, or do you want to kind of branch out a little bit?
Well, I'll tell you, there's a few thoughts to that. And, where it starts, as I said, is really getting this solo adventure experience for Tunnels and Trolls nailed. And I'm pretty confident we're going to have a prototype to show people this summer that they're going to say, hey, I get it. I like it. This is, if you were a fan of Tunnels and Trolls, I think you'll be pleased with how we've treated the franchise in this edition of it. And then to your point, right, Naked Doom is the first adventure, but there are many more, and we're going to go get all those done, right? And so you will be able to play through the entire suite of Tunnels and Trolls adventures with a character, and keep in mind that this is a character that, like any good RPG, makes it through an adventure, survives, levels up, gets rewards, gets experience, progresses, is a little tougher now, and can go into the next adventure. And you'll be able to take that character through all these adventures as you go.
Awesome.
Now, and that's the core of the offering, right? Now where things expand from there. The first part is really what I would call the content creation side of it. This is where, there is a movement in Tunnels and Trolls and in other games that players make their own adventures, right? It's not unheard of. And, the creator, Ken, and the publisher that have worked with him, Flying Buffalo, and others in the mix, they've published a lot of these adventures themselves, but the fans have done some also. And there is no good reason why we shouldn't allow that to happen in the Meta Arcade Adventures platform. Allowing people, once they get a sense of what this adventure moment-to-moment experience is like and how I enjoy it. If you can write a story, you'll be able to write your own Tunnels and Trolls adventure and put it into the platform as well, and you'll be able to sell it. And if people like it and buy it, you'll make money on that. That is really the first big step.
That's awesome. Okay, so you really want Meta Arcade to be more community-driven content than anything else.
Absolutely.
That's awesome.
Absolutely.
That's fantastic.
Well, and look, you know, I imagine, Baz, that you and other fans of Gigantic remember, you know, kind of how we like to do things when we were all at Motiga, and that ship continues to sail, and I think that's great. One of the things I did take with me, though, was that relationship with the community, and I think it's great to have these classic adventures. It's the right foundation to build on, and it's quality content that has stood the test of time for many years. That said, it is an awesome opportunity to let people give their own shot at this. And this is where sort of my own motivation for making Meta Arcade comes from. That motivation from as long as I have been in the games business, and as many games as I've had the pleasure to launch and operate, and, you know, doing some great stuff on the marketing and publishing side. I've always had a creative itch, but I don't write code anymore. That was a long time ago. And it just kind of got me thinking, well, you know, mobile is getting easier and easier to see people playing on, right? You know, I know we always viewed this in the PC business, that even though not many people would say they were gamers, it's more now than ever, but you'd have a lot of people, you know, over the years who would say, well, yeah, I'm not really a gamer, but they would play games on their PC. And I think that effect is even more pronounced on mobile. I think everybody who has a mobile device is playing mobile games. Yeah. And so there's no good reason why that next step can't be taken. I can now not just be a player of a mobile game, I can be a creator of one. I can write this adventure, I can get an audience with it, I can express my creative vision and ideas. And hey, if it works, it's entirely possible that I could make a living doing this someday, right? And that's what I think you see, well, with Twitch is a perfect example, right? You know, you could be a streamer long before Twitch came around, but you'd have to have some pretty good technical know-how of how to rig everything together. How
Those
to
were the days.
And heaven forbid, find an audience, right? Because who is watching when there's not a platform that is bringing the viewers together as well as the broadcasters? It's that sort of an idea, and now you're in a world where people can make a living as Twitch broadcasters. It's not everybody, but, you know, people do, and it gives them the chance to leave their former jobs and do things that they are passionate about doing. This to me at some level is one of the uber goals of what I am trying to do here with Meta Arcade. I know there are millions of people who have written their own narratives, their stories. I know that there are millions of gamers who have designed their own games and their own worlds in their heads, and sometimes have taken the time to put that on paper, play with their friends. Some of them have tried to get them published through classic publishing houses. You know, there is no reason why all of that content can't find an audience through a platform like this. And that really is the vision.
See, it's funny that you actually talk about that, because I know like 15 people that have like tried to do that at some point or another. There's a couple people that have tried to publish card games and other tabletop, you know, deck building games and that kind of stuff, and they just don't work because it's such a cluttered cardboard and pen and paper market. Like, you go down the street to my local hobby store, and it's just game after game after game of just like the same kind of idea and concept, but it's just like, I don't want to have all this cardboard in my closet. Like, a friend of mine's a doctor, and he has a closet full of just tabletop RPGs. Like, we're talking hundreds and hundreds of boxes, and to have that all on a tablet device, oh my gosh, I would climb Mount Everest for that. That would just be go to bed. Kids, man.
You gotta love them. I'm a parent too.
You do, man. They are a lot of fun. Yeah. But so going kind of back to Meta Arcade and kind of focusing on your goal of like starting it, what was the driving factor of it? I know that like you wanted to make this platform for everyone, community wise. You're a huge community guy, but like, what was your real kind of factor of eureka moment?
Yeah, and you know, I'd say on the one hand, maybe there is that one moment where you decide, okay, I can do this, and I am going to do it, right? And for me, it did come down to, you know, over I imagine a lot of your viewers are people who have been following the story of Motiga and Gigantic, and
Mm-hmm.
obviously over the winter, as you know, as capital got a little tight, we had a discussion at the exec level that all of the execs would either defer salary for a period of time or take time off and
Right.
work fewer days. Uh, me personally, it made sense to take the time off. Fallout 4 had just launched, and I knew I'd lose a few hundred hours in that. So as I was going through that and thinking about the sort of stuff that, look, in the event that it doesn't work out, right, because you have to face that sometimes the startup doesn't turn the corner. In the event that doesn't work out, what would I like to do? Do I have an opportunity now with the time to think a little more concretely?
Mm-hmm.
And there are a few things that came to mind during that period of introspection. One was, as I said, I look over all the stuff that I've accumulated over my life, and like you, the closets full of things, and garages, in my case, full of comic books and such. Tunnels and Trolls is one of the few games that I kept everything for, for a long, long time now. Kind of like you say, longer than I care to remember. But of course, I have some of my old D&D books, but I have all of my Tunnels and Trolls stuff. I was just a very big fan, and it really sort of cemented a place in my heart as an important game for me. And I've always had the idea that something could be done with that franchise that had not been done before. At about, one of the thoughts in my head going at the same time was seeing what had happened with mobile gaming. And I was not a big fan of mobile gaming for a long time, right? I've been I like to call it deep end game kind of guy, much like I say with a guy who'll spend hundreds of hours in Bethesda games, right?
You're a hardcore gamer, man.
Exactly.
Just accept it.
and I love that, right? But over time, I got myself more accustomed to mobile as something to do, gaming on mobile specifically, to do when I'm not at my premier gaming appliances, right? I'm not in front of my TV, right, or in front of my PC and such, right? And that happens more and more as you go about your life, and whether you're traveling or driving somebody to an event or something like that. In my case, with the kids, right? Those kinds of things, and started picking up more and more mobile, and yet I sort of that was maybe the eureka moment of, well, wait a minute. This isn't all that technically challenging to make look great and work nicely on a mobile device.
Right.
And there's not a lot of narrative in the mobile market, right? If you believe, as I think many people do, not everybody, but many people believe narrative storytelling is an important part of games.
Amen to that.
And it's okay that not all games are deep in story, but for those of us who are looking for that, even in my comic books, I preferred the story over the art, right? It's always been important to me. And yet, in mobile gaming, there's not a lot of narrative. So that's sort of the mashup of those things over a winter in in the Commonwealth is really how it started to come together in my head. And doing a little looking into this, you've got to do a certain amount of due diligence of, well, how much do you think this will cost to do? What's the technology requirements? Will this actually work on things like that? Mm-hmm. It was as I started going through that and realized not only was it something that I felt like I could do, it was something that I felt like you could unlock that idea of the platform for a large number of people and give them the tools to write those adventures and see them in print. Even if it doesn't make them a ton of money, I think a lot of us just want to get our ideas out there and see whether or not there is something there. To not just let those ideas, that creativity, that energy just sit in your soul, but to find out. Why not? Give it a shot. And this to me, sort of all that came together in, this is the way to make it happen.
And, I think that's really important, too, because I think a lot of, startup companies are like, oh, I want to be the next Blizzard, or I want to be the next, Valve. And you're just like, okay, Sally, let's sit down here and take the blinders off. This is reality. Let's calm down.
Yeah.
And I think that you kind of did that.
Yeah.
Which, really, from a indie kind of standpoint, I have a lot of respect for that, because I think indie developers and indie companies and just games in general that are developed by smaller groups of people always have a more, I guess, head on their shoulders correctly, rather than just I'm going to do this for money, or I'm going to do this for fame and stuff like that. So it's always encouraging for me to hear backstories like that you just kind of hey, I want to make it easier for people to do this, or I want to just involve people in a more easier way. It's like, you know what? I took my son to the soccer game. I have nothing to do. His team is terrible. It's a bunch of 6-year-olds running around. They have no idea what they're doing. And I'm going to break this out and play some Tunnels and Trolls because I have nothing else to do. So it's one of those kind of aspects. Mobile gaming, when it first came out, was like, oh my gosh, what are you, a filthy casual? Like, don't touch me. Like, you know,
Yeah.
it's... And it started off with Farmville and Facebook and all that stupid stuff. But mobile gaming today is probably one of the biggest parts of gaming.
Absolutely.
And I don't think people realize that. Myself personally, I don't really consider it to be a genre of worthy descent because I'm stubborn. Let's be honest with you. I come from a hardcore FPS background where, you know, you were up for hours playing Quake and Doom and that stuff. But now that I have kids, I have a family, my phone has become more of a gaming platform than I think I realize. Mm-hmm. And that's something that's really interesting to me. And I think that it'll help the brick and mortar comic stores a lot too, because they can come to you guys and say, hey, we'd like to have, I don't know, tablets that have your stuff on it. Can you sponsor us or something like that? And I mean, it allows everyone that has a business from the old times to kind of come into the new generation of, hey, this is what I played as a kid, but you know, you're 13. I don't want to play Dungeons and Dragons with my dad anymore because that's not cool. But hey, it's cool to play it on a tablet because it's video games. So I think you have something that's really special, and I think it's going to go really, really far. So I'm really excited about it. I am just genuinely excited about this.
Well, it's funny because, you know, I just hearing you talk, it reminded me of what probably was another contributing factor into thinking, even though it didn't really dawn on me at the time. And, you know, prior to joining Motiga, I lived in Iceland for a year while I was there with CCP. And that was a move with the family. And I sort of figured this was the time that I was going to teach my kids to play D&D. Mm-hmm. And I was, you know, I brought the books, I brought the miniatures, I brought the dice. You know, it was going to be, there would be a long winter, and this would be our chance to do it, right? And I, as much as it was interesting to me, it was not for them, right? And I don't think it's because it was the content. I just think kids are engaging in entertainment in a different way now.
It's a generation thing.
Yeah, and this is where, you know, I feel like at times I can watch my boys, you know, sitting, looking at their iPads, you know, watching idiots screaming and yelling on YouTube playing Minecraft or anything else, right? And to me, this felt like, look, when I was playing Tunnels and Trolls, there was a lot of stuff that I think I was doing that was good for me. I was reading, I was learning new vocabulary. There's math going on there, you know. There's
right.
And I don't want to overplay it, but to me, there is still something redeeming in that I liked about Tunnels and Trolls and I liked about Dungeons and Dragons that my kids aren't getting. Mm-hmm. And so as I put this prototype together and put it, you know, on an iPad in front of them and they start playing with it, they're digging it. Now,
that's good.
I think in general, you know, you'd like to think your kids are very partial to you and will tell you, Dad, you're doing great stuff, even if you're not. But I also know kids can be painfully honest, and
yes, they can.
Seeing them engage with it and wanting to go through the adventure and being excited about what they're doing, you know, it sort of gave me confidence that we were onto something. And I do think that, you know, again, I think back to those moments of sitting at the table in Iceland thinking, gosh, why can't I get these guys to play D&D? Yeah. Why can't I get them to play Pathfinder? What am I doing wrong? Well, this is a way to do and bring them into that world of role-playing and storytelling that I just think is fundamentally important for kids to use some of that creativity and energy and let them become more comfortable with the idea of creation itself and not just consumption, right?
Yeah, that's so important that you mentioned that, because my brother's the same way. He is 16 now, which he's taller than me, which just makes me angry. But he doesn't like any of the things that I, you know, would expect him to like at the age of 16 that I liked. Like, he doesn't like the comic books. He reads a lot. He's a good writer, but he doesn't like that type of consuming that information. He enjoys more reading on his tablet and more digital kind of consumption rather than like a more physical paperback stuff, which is weird to me. And I don't think that we'll ever understand that because that's not how we were raised.
Sure.
I mean, like I would spend hours looking at comic books and reading graphic novels and stuff like that. In today's days, it's, oh, hey, someone made a audiobook about it. Let's listen to it,
Yeah.
which is cool and convenient. But it's like I like reading.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well,
So
and I hear you, and I do think that part of my affinity for doing this is that it does get me back into the tabletop pen and paper space, right? You know, it just it's taking this property and transitioning it into something where we are digitally remastering it.
mhm.
To me, I mean, hey, it is a kick for me to be rubbing shoulders with Ken St. Andre and Rick Loomis and Liz Danforth and Steve Crompton and Bear
I'm
Peters.
sure that's awesome.
This is a blast. And, to be involved in that side of the industry again, I do think at the end of the day, a lot of this stuff is going digital, and I don't know that the print analog side of this stuff ever completely goes away.
Right.
But it has certainly gone away for my kids, right? It is
Mhm.
something that is a little different for them.
Yeah.
This is a chance to continue to be involved with that side of things.
Right.
The smell of new paper when you open up a box or
Oh,
a new
beautiful.
comic, right?
Ah, yeah.
That stuff I still enjoy greatly. And digital won't replicate that,
Nope.
but I do think that getting things out there digitally does generally increase the awareness and
It
will
does.
increase the excitement for the print stuff as well. I think it's a good
Yeah.
thing.
It really does. Now, kind of a question that I had about the game itself: is there going to be like voice acting and like sound effects,
Uh,
or how are you guys going to handle that?
Yeah, so, again, we are working on a prototype right now, and I will tell you that, yes, we are working on audio for that.
Sweet.
I am reluctant to give it all away, but I'll tell you this, that yes, there's music, yes, there's sound effects, and yes, there will be narration. You won't have to use it, right?
Mhm.
If you just want to, turn it off in settings, if you just want to skip through it, that's fine. You know, Today is not the day where Meta Arcade has the resources to go get some pros doing some voice acting yet,
I'll
but
do it for free. I'm telling you right now, I will do it for free.
yeah. So, and that is exactly the kind of stuff we're doing, right?
That's awesome.
Is putting that stuff in there. So absolutely, and it'll be the kind of thing where I think about the mobile stuff I play. I'll give you one that I do play, which is Star Trek Timelines from Disruptor Beam. I play on a I check into it several times a day.
I know what I'm downloading after this show's over.
And one of the things that's fun about it is the sound effects, right? Is you are hearing the phasers, you are hearing the
That's awesome.
the doors opening with those chimes, you hear the voices of those voice actors and stuff. But I don't always want to do that with my headphones, right? And I'll have the sound off when I'm in an environment where I don't want a bunch of noise. And then when I'm at home and I'm on my own and I'm checking in for a few minutes, I'll turn those speakers on. And I think that's the kind of sort of cadence that I suspect to happen with people using audio in what we're doing with Tunnels and Trolls. It would be purely your option. I think it will enhance the experience if you
Amen.
want it, but it doesn't hinder you from playing the game if it's not the right time for audio.
Yeah, audio for mobile games has been something that's always, I don't want to say been kind of my frustration, because it's usually always awful. Mainly because your phone can't do audio that well. Like, I don't care what phone you have, it's not going to do it's not going to make, headphone quality sound or surround sound quality sound. So even like you're just kind of considering and putting it in there just because people want it, which is good. So
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I'll tell you, right? So, we have talked about this. So the guys who are doing the audio for us are Skew Sound.
okay.
And yeah, so Skew Sound has done art for a number of things. Grim Dawn is one of their big
Yes.
ones that they did. So if you played that, you've heard their music and their sound.
Beautiful
and such.
stuff.
And so those are the guys that we're working with on the audio side. They took to the concept and understood the fledgling startup nature of Meta Arcade, and so it's a great relationship where we're getting that started. And so I expect that as we bring the prototype out this summer for Naked Doom, you'll have audio in that.
Awesome. All right, so kind of like the last kind of question that I have for you is: do you plan on when you release the game? Are you going to be asking the community to help fund the final project via like Kickstarter or something of that nature, or do you have private funding that you are doing yourself?
Well, it may be both. To be honest, I'm not sure yet.
Cool.
I think it is the kind of thing where in full transparency, as I've told many folks, Meta Arcade maybe has one employee if you include me. It's not paying me, but I have done a lot of work with freelancers and contractors to get this prototype built. And at some point, right, the seeing how things go and how they progress over the summer, getting the community's reaction to the prototype, that's going to lead me to think about how to do this next. I can get this prototype done just out of my own pocket, and I think that's the right way to do it. But depending on how things go and maybe how big this feels like it can be, does a Kickstarter or crowdfunding make sense? It could very well be the case. Does it make sense to go out and raise some financing? It could very well be the case. I would say I'm tiptoeing into both of those things at the moment a little bit, but mostly focused on getting the prototype cooking, right?
Awesome.
If at the end of the day, the prototype isn't fun, that gives us enough information to decide what's next. Do we pivot? Do we turn a different direction? Is there a different thing to be building in the vein of what we're talking about? And that'll be the point at which we know what's the right way to proceed in terms of any potential financing.
Awesome. Well, Mr. David, I want to thank you so much for being on the show. It's always fun to talk to you, mainly just because you're super chill, and I like that.
Well, great. No, it's fun talking with you as well, man. And good to get back together. It was. I will, like I said before, and I'll say again. One of the things that I dearly loved about Motiga and dearly loved about CCP prior to that was the community and being interacting with them and getting their feedback and using that to influence things. And I figured whatever I was doing next, I needed to keep that as a part of it, right? I needed to find a way where I could enable the community to be a bigger part of product development than perhaps what I had even seen at those two companies, which frankly did it really darn well. And so that is a big part of this for me, and that's why I love doing this. I love talking with you and other streamers and other folks in the community. I just think it's a big part of what gives me the positive energy to keep doing what I'm doing.
For sure, man. Now, your website is metaarcade.com.
It sure is.
And is there anything special that you want to also plug or kind of talk about before we wrap things up?
Well, I'll give you a couple things to think about. The first is that we do have a sign up for early access there. So if what we're talking about sounds interesting, go ahead and register for that, and we will keep you posted as how early access comes together. I do think that might be a little sooner than people think based on what most people anticipate the development of games to be. This is something that we are able to get this prototype going pretty quickly. Awesome. and hope to be able to start bringing people in on that very, very soon. And so that'd be the first thing. If you want to be among the first in early access, that's the place to go and to register. Additionally, there's more news coming on a fairly regular basis here. I would just recommend that if people want to stay in the know and hear the latest about what's happening, best way to do that is to follow us at Meta Arcade on Facebook and on Twitter.
Okay. And
again, check in for early access, and to the extent that there's more stuff going on, you'll always find it on our website.
Awesome. And your Twitter handle is Pokathulu.
You got it. Right. That's been
still
for a while.
The best Twitter handle in the world. Oh my gosh. So you said the release or the prototype kind of summer-ish, give or take, which is I'm looking forward to. Check out metaarcade.com for all the latest and greatest information, as well as on their Twitter. Twitter? I don't know. That's not even a word. Twitter at MetaArcade, also on Facebook. Facebook.com/MetaArcade, I assume?
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, David, that is going to wrap things up for us. Thank you so much for your time, and I really appreciate it. Tune in next time where we talk more stuff. I'm not sure what he's going to bring to us next, but it's going to be fantastic. So
stay tuned. It won't be long.
It will. All right, viewers, take care, everybody. Have a great afternoon, morning, or evening. We'll see you guys next time. Bye.
Thanks.